Welcome back to our special series on Ray Huang's masterpiece, 1587, A Year of No Significance. In our last episode, we saw how the majestic Ming Empire began to stall under the weight of its own traditions. But history isn't just about dates, it's about the people trapped within the system. Today, we're diving into the book's powerful final chapter, the conclusion, a civilization at its limit. So, that really begs the question, right? How did one person's choices, or maybe their failures, end up shaping the destiny of millions? Well, to answer that, let's dive right back into the heart of the 16th century Forbidden City. Okay, so to really get a grip on why this whole system was failing, we've got to zoom in on one guy. His name was Li Zi, and Ray Huang paints him as this incredible, self-conflicting philosopher, a real rebel. I mean, just think about that for a second. His work was officially banned, forbidden, but at the same time, people were secretly treasuring it, reprinting it. This tells you Li Ji wasn't just some dusty scholar. No way. He was an intellectual rebel in an age that demanded absolute conformity, and his very existence kind of embodied the deep, unspoken anguish of his time. So what was he saying that was so dangerous? Well, his ideas were basically radioactive, and here's why. He wasn't just questioning a policy here or a corrupt official there. He was challenging the absolute authority of the Confucian sages. He was judging people based on what they did, not some moral label. He was, in effect, shaking the very foundations of the state's entire ideology. This was a direct threat to the whole shebang. So, I've mentioned this intellectual cage a couple of times. What exactly was it? Well, you have to understand, this was an empire run not by flexible, adaptable laws, but by a super rigid, all-encompassing moral code. And this right here, this contrast between the ideal and the reality, this is the absolute heart of Ray Huang's argument. The idea was beautiful, right? A government run on virtue and righteousness. But the reality? It was a system totally paralyzed by empty rituals. It led to stagnation because things like creative law and commerce just couldn't grow. Huang says that for 2,000 years, China had basically tried to use morality instead of law. And by the time we get to the Ming Dynasty, that system had hit a dead end. It just wasn't working anymore. Think about it this way. The empire simply lacked the technical tools to solve its real-world problems. I mean, you can't fix a broken tax code with a Confucian saying, right? This total reliance on abstract virtue meant the state was incredibly fragile. It just couldn't adapt. All right. So what happens when you get a brilliant mind like Li Ji and he starts pushing against the bars of this moral cage? What's the price you pay for daring to think differently? Well, the system's response wasn't to debate him. It couldn't. Its own logic was kind of circular. So instead of a debate, you got suppression, plain and simple. His works were condemned as dangerous and he was thrown in prison. And get this, not for committing a crime, but for his thoughts.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. While the Ming Empire is completely consumed by this internal paralysis, focused on moral purity, the world outside is changing at lightning speed. In 1588, just 1 year later, England's navy defeats the invincible Spanish Armada. And how? Not with better morals, but with flexible tactics and better naval tech. And around 1600, you have the Dutch and English East India Companies being founded, unleashing the power of commercial law and organization, the very things the Ming system was designed to prevent. And so, in 1602, Li Ji, seeing that there was just no place for him or his ideas in this world, performed his final act of protest. He took his own life while in prison. But here's the thing. Li Ji's tragic end wasn't just an isolated case. It wasn't just one man's story. Huang argues it was a symptom of a much, much larger disease within the system. In fact, Huang himself calls the book a grand record of total failure. That's a stunning verdict, right? He basically reveals that every single major figure of this era, no matter who they were or what they were trying to do, was doomed by the system they served. I mean, just look at this pattern. You have the Wanli emperor, the supreme ruler. He just retreats into inaction for decades. Zhang Zhuzheng, the great reformer, his family is ruined after his death. Qi Ji, a military genius, pushed to the side to die in obscurity, and Hai Ri, the absolute paragon of morality, they basically say he's impractical and give him no real power. It didn't matter who you were. The end result was always the same, ruin. So the crucial point here is this. The problem wasn't the people. Their individual talents, their flaws, their virtues, none of it really mattered in the end. They were all just characters in a play whose tragic ending had already been written by the system itself. And this all brings us to the civilization's final verdict, and the answer to why 1587, a year that seems so insignificant on the surface, was actually one of the most important of them all.
You know, when you look at the Wanli Emperor, you realize his personal choices mattered so much less than the systemic limits he inherited. By 1587, the great Ming Empire had reached the absolute end of its developmental potential. The system had simply run out of road. A state that's managed by abstract morality, instead of by numbers, by law, and by technology, it just couldn't advance. It could only decay. Good intentions just weren't enough anymore. That moral framework that had held the empire together for centuries, it had become a straitjacket, strangling any possibility of real change. And that really is the final verdict here. The yearbook of 1587 isn't a record of some dramatic battle or revolution. It's a complete record of failure. It was the year that the slow, quiet, grinding failure of an entire civilization became undeniable. You could see it right there, in the lives of the men who were trying to run it. So Huang's masterpiece really leaves us with this incredibly powerful question. When a system is designed to fail, what is the role of the individual? It forces us to see that history isn't just shaped by heroes and villains, but by the invisible structures that trap them all. And that's a lesson that is just as relevant today as it was in the final fading years of the Ming Dynasty.